There are some cities in this world that simply make sense. They're built beside rivers that provide water and transportation. They grow near harbors where ships can dock and trade can flourish. They emerge on fertile plains where crops can grow and populations can be fed. They develop near mines, near forests, near resources that justify their existence. And then there's Las Vegas. Las Vegas exists in one of the driest, hottest, most unforgiving deserts in all of North America. There's no river flowing through it, no harbor on its doorstep, no rich farmland surrounding it, no gold mines or oil fields beneath it. Nothing in the landscape suggests that this should be home to millions of people, that it should welcome over 40 million visitors every single year, that it should glow so brightly at night that astronauts can see it from space. Yet, here it stands, a city of lights in an ocean of darkness, a garden of excess in a landscape of scarcity, an entertainment capital built on sand and springs and sheer determination. The story of Las Vegas is not simply a story about gambling, though gambling is certainly part of it. It's not just about organized crime, though the mob played its role. It's not merely about corporate empires, though they now dominate the skyline. The story of Las Vegas is something far more complex, far more fascinating. It's a story about water and desert survival, about federal infrastructure projects that changed everything, about desperate economic decisions during hard times, about criminals who became businessmen and businessmen who thought like criminals, about entertainment and spectacle and the American appetite for reinvention. This is the complete history of Las Vegas, from the first springs that bubbled up 10,000 years ago to the digital spheres and Formula One races of today. From native peoples who knew how to survive in the harsh desert to the resort developers who tried to conquer it entirely. From a railway watering stop to the entertainment capital of the world. It's a story that spans centuries but feels compressed into decades. A story of impossible survival and spectacular transformation. A story that reveals something essential about America itself. Our optimism, our excess, our belief that anything is possible if you're willing to bet on it. So let's begin at the very beginning. Long before there were any casinos, any hotels, any city at all. Let's begin with water in the desert and the people who first discovered it. The Mojave Desert stretches across parts of 4 American states: California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. It's a vast expanse of rock and sand and sky, a place where summer temperatures regularly climb past 43 degrees Celsius, where rainfall might total just 10 centimeters in an entire year, where the landscape appears hostile to life itself. But appearances can be deceiving. The desert isn't empty, it's simply selective. Plants have adapted, creosote bushes with roots that spread wide to capture every drop of moisture, Joshua trees with their strange angular branches reaching towards the sky, cacti that store water in their flesh. Animals have learned to be nocturnal, avoiding the killing heat of midday sun. Life persists, but only for those who understand the desert's rules. The Las Vegas Valley, nestled within this harsh landscape, had something unusual, something precious. Underground aquifers fed natural springs that rose to the surface in scattered locations. These weren't dramatic waterfalls or rushing streams, just small pools, marshy patches where grass could grow green instead of brown, where trees could take root and survive. In a landscape defined by dryness, these springs were everything. The southern Paiute people knew about these springs. Archaeological evidence suggests their ancestors lived in this valley for at least 10,000 years. 10,000 years. Try to imagine that span of time. Entire civilizations rising and falling, whilst generations of Paiute families lived in this desert valley, understanding it in ways that later settlers never would. They knew which plants were edible and when to harvest them. They knew how to hunt rabbits and bighorn sheep without depleting the population. They knew how to survive the scorching summers and the surprisingly cold winters. They knew where the springs were and how to use them sustainably, taking only what they needed, leaving enough for tomorrow and next week and next season. The Paiutes lived lightly on the land because they had to. The springs provided enough water for small groups, but not for large permanent settlements. The desert enforced its own population limits. You could survive here, even thrive here, but only if you respected the environment's boundaries. For thousands upon thousands of years, this pattern continued. The valley was inhabited but never crowded, used but never exploited. It remained fundamentally what it had always been. A harsh desert with precious pockets of water, a place of survival rather than abundance. The first Europeans to document the area were Spanish explorers traveling the Old Spanish Trail in the early 1800s. This trail connected Santa Fe in New Mexico to Los Angeles in California, a trade route crossing hundreds of miles of difficult terrain. For travelers on this route, days could pass without finding water. Horses and mules suffered. Men grew desperate. So when these Spanish explorers came upon the Las Vegas Valley, with its springs and green vegetation, it must have felt miraculous. After endless days of brown sand and gray rock, suddenly there was grass, there were trees, there was water bubbling up from the ground, clear and cool. They called it Las Vegas, the meadows, because compared to the desolation surrounding it, these patches of green truly seemed like meadows, like an oasis, like a gift from God himself. The name stuck, but for most of the 19th century, Las Vegas remained exactly what it had always been, a rest stop. A place to water your animals and fill your canteens before continuing your journey. Not a destination, not a settlement, just a dot on a map where you could find water if you knew where to look. Political boundaries changed around it. The land was Spanish territory, then Mexican after independence, then American after the Mexican-American War in 1848. It became part of Nevada territory, then part of the new state of Nevada when it was admitted to the Union in 1864. But these political designations meant very little in practical terms. Las Vegas remained isolated, sparsely visited, fundamentally unchanged. The springs kept flowing, the desert kept baking in the summer sun, and very few people had any reason to spend time there. That would all change at the turn of the 20th century. Not because anyone suddenly recognized the valley's potential, but because of something far more practical. Railroads were expanding across the American West, and steam engines needed water. Lots of it. And Las Vegas, improbably, had springs. The early years of the 1900s saw railway construction boom across the western United States. Companies competed to connect major cities, to establish routes before their rivals could claim the territory, to link the rapidly growing state of California to the rest of the nation. One of these ambitious projects was the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad. The name tells you exactly what it did. It connected Los Angeles on the Pacific coast to Salt Lake City in Utah, providing a crucial link between California and the inland states. The railway was a joint venture between Senator William Andrews Clark, a wealthy Montana copper magnate, and E.H. Harriman, one of the most powerful railway barons in American history. These were men with resources, with vision, with the determination to build through landscapes that seemed impossible. But even with unlimited money and political influence, the Mojave Desert presented serious challenges. Steam engines, the technology of the era, required enormous quantities of water. The boilers had to be refilled regularly, or the engines would fail. Crossing hundreds of miles of desert meant establishing watering stations at regular intervals. The railway planners studied their maps carefully. They needed a location roughly halfway between Los Angeles and Salt Lake City. It had to have reliable water year-round. It had to have relatively flat land suitable for building a depot and maintenance facilities. It had to be accessible. Las Vegas fit the requirements perfectly. The springs provided water, the valley was flat, the location was ideal, the decision was made. Las Vegas would become a railway town. May the 15th, 1905. This date is generally recognized as the official founding of Las Vegas as a city. On that spring day, the railway company held a land auction. 110 acres near the depot were surveyed and divided into lots. People came from across the region, hoping to establish businesses in this new railway town, hoping to claim a piece of what might become valuable property. The auction was enthusiastic. Lots sold quickly, some for surprisingly high prices, considering this was empty desert land. By the end of the day, the foundation of downtown Las Vegas had been established. Streets were platted. Property lines were drawn. A town began to emerge from the dust. Those first years were rough. The early settlers built quickly and cheaply. Wooden structures that provided basic shelter but little comfort. Saloons opened to serve the railway workers. Boarding houses offered beds, though often multiple men shared a room. There were general stores selling supplies at inflated prices. There were restaurants serving simple meals. And there were, of course, establishments catering to other appetites. Gambling dens, brothels, the things that always appear in frontier towns where men outnumber women and entertainment options are limited. The population was predominantly male. Railway workers, drifters, men running from something or towards something, men who didn't fit comfortably in more civilized places. The streets were unpaved, so dust blew constantly. Summer heat was brutal. Temperatures exceeding 43 degrees Celsius were common. Winter brought surprising cold that caught people unprepared. But the town survived because the railway provided economic stability. Workers received regular wages. They spent money at local businesses. The economy functioned. Las Vegas wasn't prosperous, but it was viable. By 1910, the population had grown to around 1,500 people. By 1920, it had reached perhaps 5,000. These numbers seem tiny now, but they represented steady growth for a desert town with no natural economic advantages beyond its location on a railway line. The town developed basic infrastructure. A post office was established. Schools were built for the growing number of children. Churches appeared, bringing some semblance of moral structure to a fairly lawless place. The town incorporated, elected officials, tried to establish order. Gambling was technically legal in Nevada until 1909, when progressive reformers managed to get it banned. But the ban was loosely enforced in Las Vegas, too remote for regular oversight, too small for authorities to care much about. Gambling continued in back rooms and basement establishments, everyone knowing it was happening, but few bothering to stop it. Then came Prohibition in 1920. Across America, the production, sale, and transportation of alcohol became illegal. In most cities, this meant speakeasies and secret drinking, constant cat and mouse games between bootleggers and laws. Enforcement. In Las Vegas, it meant business continued largely as usual. The town was too isolated for effective enforcement. Federal agents rarely visited. Saloons became technically illegal but operated openly, barely bothering to hide what they were doing. Las Vegas in the 1920s had developed a reputation. It was rough, lawless, a place where conventional rules didn't quite apply, where you could drink, gamble, and visit prostitutes without much fear of consequences. It attracted people who were comfortable in that environment and repelled those who weren't. Block 16, the designated red light district, operated completely in the open. Brothels lined the street. Women sat in windows or stood in doorways, advertising their services. Police knew about it. Everyone knew about it. But it was tolerated, even tacitly approved, because it kept the prostitution contained to one area and provided tax revenue to the city. This was Las Vegas in the late 1920s. A small, rough frontier town surviving on railway traffic and vice tourism. It could have remained that way indefinitely, slowly growing but never becoming particularly significant. But two decisions made in the late 1920s and early 1930s would transform Las Vegas completely. Those decisions were the construction of Hoover Dam and the re-legalization of gambling. Together, they would turn this dusty railway town into a boom town and set in motion the changes that would eventually create the Las Vegas we know today. The 1920s saw growing concern about water management in the American Southwest. The Colorado River, one of the great rivers of the western United States, flowed through 7 states: Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California. But its flow was unpredictable and often problematic. During wet years, snow melt from the Rocky Mountains caused flooding. Towns were inundated. Farmland was destroyed. During dry years, the river slowed to a trickle, leaving communities without adequate water. There was no way to store water from wet years to use during dry ones. No way to control the river's power for electricity generation. No reliable system for irrigation. Engineers proposed an ambitious solution. Build a massive dam, the largest concrete structure ever constructed. It would control the river's flow, prevent flooding, create an enormous reservoir for water storage, and generate hydroelectric power for the growing cities of the Southwest. The proposed location was Black Canyon, on the border between Nevada and Arizona. The canyon walls were steep and solid, perfect for anchoring a dam. The location was remote but accessible. It would work. the engineers said, though the scale of the project was almost incomprehensible. The proposal was controversial. It required enormous federal investment during a period of economic uncertainty. Some states worried about water rights and allocation. Environmentalists concerned about the impact on the river and surrounding ecosystems raised objections. Local communities would be displaced, but the arguments in favor ultimately prevailed. The dam would provide flood control, water storage, irrigation for agriculture, and electricity for Los Angeles and other cities. The economic benefits seemed to justify the costs. The Boulder Canyon Project Act was signed into law in 1928. Construction would begin in 1931. The dam would eventually be named after President Herbert Hoover, though he would be out of office and widely blamed for the Great Depression by the time it was completed. For Las Vegas, the dam project was absolutely transformative. Suddenly, thousands of workers were coming to southern Nevada. Strong men willing to do dangerous work in extreme conditions. Men who would need housing, food, supplies, and entertainment. Men with steady wages burning holes in their pockets. The federal government built Boulder City specifically to house dam workers. It was a planned community designed with strict rules. No alcohol, no gambling, no prostitution. Clean, orderly streets. Government supervision of nearly every aspect of life. The idea was to keep workers focused, healthy, and productive. But men working in 120-degree heat, sometimes even hotter inside the canyon, doing back-breaking labor with primitive equipment, facing constant danger of injury or death, they needed somewhere to release the pressure. Boulder City offered nothing. Las Vegas offered everything. On Friday evenings and Saturday mornings, thousands of workers poured into Las Vegas. They came with money and determination to forget about the brutal conditions at the dam site. They wanted to drink heavily. They wanted to gamble recklessly. They wanted female companionship. They wanted to fight, to shout, to feel alive after a week of feeling like they might die at any moment. Las Vegas transformed almost overnight. The population exploded. New businesses opened to serve this sudden influx of customers. Saloons expanded. Gambling halls operated around the clock. Hotels appeared, though calling them hotels was generous. Often just rooms with beds, sometimes multiple beds per room, sometimes multiple men per bed, depending on shifts. Block 16 became incredibly busy. More brothels opened. Women came from across the country, drawn by the money that dam workers were spending freely. The red light district operated completely openly now, because there was simply too much business and too much money for anyone to seriously consider shutting it down. The downtown area, particularly Fremont Street, became the center of Las Vegas nightlife. Bright lights advertised casinos and bars. Music poured from doorways. Men crowded the sidewalks, moving from one establishment to another, looking for the next drink, the next game, the next thrill. This was Las Vegas's first real boom. The first time the city experienced rapid, dramatic growth driven by external forces beyond its control. The pattern would repeat throughout the city's history. Outside events creating opportunities that Las Vegas would exploit ruthlessly and completely. The dam construction continued through the depths of the Great Depression. Whilst the national economy collapsed and unemployment reached devastating levels, Las Vegas thrived. The federal project provided jobs, workers spent money, businesses flourished. The city was an island of prosperity in a sea of economic despair. The dam was completed in 1936, 2 years ahead of schedule. It was an engineering marvel, one of the great achievements of the 20th century. The concrete structure rose over 220 meters high. Lake Mead, the reservoir created behind the dam, became the largest man-made lake in the entire Western Hemisphere, a vast body of water in the middle of the desert. When the project ended, many people feared Las Vegas would collapse. The workers would leave, the boom would end, the city would return to being a sleepy railway town, perhaps even smaller than before as people who had come for the dam boom drifted away. But something else had happened in 1931, the same year dam construction began. Something that would prove even more important to Las Vegas's long-term future than the dam itself. Nevada had legalized gambling, again, and this time it would be permanent. The Great Depression hit Nevada particularly hard. The state's economy had long been dependent on mining, but by the late 1920s, most of the easily accessible precious metals had been extracted. Mines were closing. Towns that had boomed during gold and silver rushes were becoming ghost towns. Unemployment was rising even before the stock market crashed in 1929. When the national economy collapsed, Nevada's situation became desperate. The state government was running out of money. Tax revenues were plummeting. People were leaving, seeking opportunities elsewhere. Something had to be done. Nevada politicians looked at their options. The state couldn't compete with California in agriculture. Not enough water. It couldn't compete with eastern states in manufacturing. No infrastructure, no workforce, too far from markets. It couldn't compete in traditional industries at all. But Nevada could offer something other states wouldn't. It could offer vice. It could become the place where Americans went to do things that were illegal everywhere else. Two major decisions emerged from this desperation. First, Nevada would have the most lenient divorce laws in America. Only 6 weeks of residency required instead of months or years elsewhere. Simple grounds for divorce. Fast processing. Suddenly, anyone wanting to quickly end their marriage would come to Nevada. Second, gambling would be fully legalized. Not hidden or restricted, but completely legal and regulated. Any business could operate gambling as long as they paid licensing fees and taxes. The gambling decision was purely pragmatic. It wasn't based on moral philosophy or personal freedom. It was economic survival. Nevada needed revenue desperately, and gambling could provide it. On March the 19th, 1931, Assembly Bill 98 was signed into law. Gambling was legal in Nevada. It was the only state in the entire country where you could walk into a business and place a legal bet on a roulette wheel or card game. The impact wasn't immediate. Early casinos were modest operations. Often just a few gaming tables in the back of a bar or hotel. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that suggested what Las Vegas would eventually become. Downtown Las Vegas, along Fremont Street, saw the first cluster of legal casinos. The Northern Club, the Boulder Club, the Apache Hotel. These establishments served local customers and the dam workers, but they were fairly basic. Green felt tables, simple chairs, dealers who might or might not be completely honest. an atmosphere of cigarette smoke and desperation more than glamour and excitement. The combination of Hoover Dam workers and legal gambling created Las Vegas's first real identity as something more than just a railway town. It was becoming a place where working men could enjoy themselves without legal consequences, where the usual rules didn't quite apply, where you could gamble legally, drink heavily despite national prohibition being barely ended, and visit prostitutes without shame or arrest. But gambling alone wouldn't be enough to sustain long-term growth. When the dam was completed in 1936 and workers began leaving, casino revenues dropped noticeably. Las Vegas needed something more sustainable. It needed a different kind of tourist, wealthier visitors who would spend more money and stay longer. The next phase of evolution came from an unexpected direction. Not from downtown Las Vegas with its rough bars and basic casinos, but from Highway 91, the road connecting Las Vegas to Los Angeles. This stretch of highway, running south from downtown, would eventually become the most famous street in the city. It would become the Las Vegas Strip. Highway 91 was the main route for anyone driving from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, as car ownership increased and roads improved, more Californians were making the trip. They came for weekend getaways, quick divorces, gambling that was legal in Nevada but illegal back home. A few clever entrepreneurs realized something important. Land just outside the Las Vegas city limits was significantly cheaper than land downtown. Property taxes were lower in the unincorporated county area. Regulations were more relaxed. Building codes were less strict. You could build larger properties with more parking. Why build downtown and deal with city regulations and higher costs when you could build on the highway and save money while still catching the tourists' traffic coming from California? In 1941, the El Rancho Vegas opened on Highway 91, several miles south of downtown. It's generally considered the first hotel resort on what would become the Strip. It wasn't enormous by later standards, just 63 rooms initially, but it was different from anything downtown offered. The El Rancho Vegas had a theme, Western ranch style, with rustic architecture and cowboy motifs. It had a proper showroom for entertainment, bringing in performers rather than just having gambling. It had a restaurant offering quality dining, not just basic meals. It had a swimming pool, something the downtown casinos didn't offer. It was trying to be a destination, a place where people would want to spend time and money, not just a gambling hall where they'd play cards and leave. The concept worked surprisingly well. Visitors liked the resort atmosphere. They liked having entertainment and dining included. They liked feeling like they were staying somewhere special rather than just sleeping near a casino. The El Rancho Vegas was profitable, which naturally inspired imitators. The Last Frontier opened in 1942, continuing the Western theme. It was slightly larger and even more elaborate in its theming. More properties followed through the 1940s, each trying to offer something unique whilst following the basic resort casino model that El Rancho had established. But the real transformation of the Strip, the moment when it became something truly significant, came with the involvement of organized crime. Because by the mid-1940s, mobsters across America had recognized Las Vegas's extraordinary potential. The end of Prohibition in 1933 had created a crisis for organized crime. Bootlegging had generated enormous profits for crime families in New York, Chicago, Kansas City, Detroit, Cleveland, and other major cities. Criminal organizations had become wealthy, sophisticated, and powerful during the Prohibition years. When alcohol became legal again, these organizations needed new revenue sources. Gambling was an obvious option. Illegal gambling operations existed in most major cities, but they were constantly threatened by law enforcement, required paying off police and politicians, and faced competition from other criminal groups. Las Vegas offered something unique: legal gambling. An isolated location far from major law enforcement centers, lax regulation, a cash-heavy business that was difficult to track, rapid growth, creating opportunities for investment. It was perfect for organized crime's purposes. Initially, mob involvement was subtle. Financing for casino construction, silent partnerships with legitimate businessmen who held gaming licenses whilst mobsters controlled operations behind the scenes, money flowing in from criminal activities elsewhere, being invested in seemingly legitimate Las Vegas businesses. But in the mid-1940s, Benjamin Siegel arrived in Las Vegas and changed everything. Siegel, known as Bugsy, though he hated the nickname, was backed by East Coast crime families. He came to Las Vegas with a vision and access to seemingly unlimited funding from his criminal associates. His project was the Flamingo Hotel, and whilst it wasn't the first strip casino, it would define what Las Vegas could become. Benjamin Siegel had a vision that went beyond the basic resort casinos that existed in the early 1940s. He didn't want another Western-themed property catering to working-class tourists. He wanted Hollywood glamour. He wanted European sophistication. He wanted luxury that would attract wealthy visitors who wouldn't normally consider visiting Las Vegas. The Flamingo would have elegant architecture, nothing rustic about it. It would have luxurious hotel rooms with the finest furnishings. It would have a showroom featuring top entertainment from Hollywood and New York. It would have multiple restaurants offering fine dining. It would have lush landscaping with tropical plants and extensive gardens, creating an oasis atmosphere in the desert. It would have amenities, swimming pools, tennis courts, health spa that most hotels anywhere in America didn't offer. Siegel was obsessed with perfection. He insisted on the highest quality materials and the latest technology. He wanted air conditioning throughout the property, still relatively rare in the mid-1940s. He wanted every room to have a private bathroom with expensive fixtures. He wanted European marble and hardwood floors and crystal chandeliers. The problem was that this vision was phenomenally expensive. Construction costs spiraled completely out of control. Materials were expensive and sometimes difficult to obtain in the post-war period. Siegel kept changing plans and demanding improvements, driving costs even higher. His management of the project was chaotic. Money flowed out constantly, whilst completion dates kept being pushed back. His financial backers, the crime families who were funding this project with their illegal profits, began to worry. They'd invested millions of dollars. They expected returns. Instead, they saw endless delays and mounting costs with no clear end in sight. The Flamingo finally opened on December the 26th, 1946. The opening was meant to be glamorous, attracting celebrities and establishing the property's elite reputation immediately. But the opening was a disaster. The hotel wasn't finished. Only a few rooms were actually ready for guests. The weather was terrible, grounding flights from Los Angeles and preventing many invited celebrities from attending. The entertainment was good, but the audience was small. The casino lost money because the few guests who were there got lucky. The property closed temporarily in January to finish construction. It reopened in March 1947 with the hotel actually completed. Business improved gradually, but the damage was done. Segal had wasted millions of his backers' money. He'd made promises he couldn't keep. He'd shown himself to be an unreliable partner. On June the 20th, 1947, Benjamin Segal was shot and killed in Beverly Hills. He was sitting in the living room of his girlfriend's house when someone fired through the window with a rifle. The assassination remains officially unsolved, but everyone understood what had happened. His mob backers had decided he was more valuable dead than alive. After Segal's death, new management took control of the Flamingo. They operated it more efficiently, with proper accounting and realistic expectations. And gradually, the property became profitable. More importantly, it proved that Segal's vision was correct, even if his execution was flawed. The Flamingo established a template that every major strip property would follow for the next several decades. Luxury accommodations, world-class entertainment, fine dining, professional casino operations, beautiful landscaping and amenities, everything designed to attract wealthy tourists who would stay for days rather than just stopping for a few hours. The 1950s saw this model repeated and refined. New properties opened regularly, each trying to outdo the previous ones. The Desert Inn opened in 1950, elegant and sophisticated. The Sahara opened in 1952 with an African theme and the first proper high-rise tower on the Strip. The Sands opened in 1953 and would become legendary as the home of Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack. The Riviera opened in 1955 as the Strip's first truly high-rise building. The Dunes, the Tropicana, the Stardust, each new property pushed the boundaries a bit further. And behind many of these properties, sometimes hidden and sometimes barely concealed, organized crime families were pulling strings and reaping enormous profits. The mob era of Las Vegas had truly begun, and it would last for more than 3 decades. The 1950s and 60s are often remembered as Las Vegas's golden age. For tourists visiting the Strip, it seemed like paradise. The neon signs glowed with impossible brightness. Showrooms featured the biggest stars in entertainment. Hotels offered luxury at surprisingly reasonable prices. Gambling was exciting and legal, something you couldn't do back home. The weather was reliably warm. The atmosphere felt sophisticated and slightly naughty. It was everything a vacation should be. But behind the glamorous facade, behind the smiling dealers and elegant showrooms, organized crime controlled significant portions of the Las Vegas casino industry. Not all of it, certainly. Some properties were legitimately owned and operated by honest businessmen, but many of the major casinos, the most profitable ones, had hidden mob ownership or were under mob influence. The method was straightforward in concept, but complex in execution. Crime families would finance casino construction through complicated financial arrangements. Often, they would use legitimate businessmen as fronts. These frontmen would hold the gaming licenses, appear as the owners in official documents, manage day-to-day operations. But the real power, the real profit, flowed back to the mobsters who'd provided the money. The profit mechanism was called skimming. It's a simple word for a very effective system. Before casino revenues were officially counted and reported to regulators and tax authorities, cash would be diverted, taken off the top. This skimmed money never appeared in the official books. It was never taxed. It flowed back to crime families in Chicago, Kansas City, Cleveland, Milwaukee, and other cities, supporting criminal operations nationwide. Skimming was elegant in its simplicity. Casinos handled enormous amounts of cash, thousands of transactions daily, hundreds of tables and slot machines generating revenue simultaneously. Tracking every single pound note and coin was difficult, even with honest accounting. With deliberately poor accounting, with count rooms controlled by mob associates, it was nearly impossible to detect. The amounts being skimmed were staggering, millions of pounds annually from major properties. The Stardust alone was generating huge skim for the Chicago outfit and Kansas City mob. The Fremont was skimmed by the same groups. The Tropicana, the Desert Inn, others. The system was widespread and extraordinarily profitable. The Federal Bureau of Investigation knew this was happening. They'd been watching organized crime's involvement in Las Vegas since the late 1940s. They conducted surveillance, planted listening devices, built case files. But proving the skim in court was incredibly difficult. The operations were sophisticated. The fronts seemed legitimate. Witnesses were intimidated or simply disappeared. Financial records were deliberately confusing. Gaming regulations at the time were relatively weak, making it hard to demonstrate that anything illegal was occurring. Years of investigation would be needed before successful prosecutions could happen. Meanwhile, the skim continued. Money flowed from Las Vegas to organized crime families across America, funding everything from loan sharking to labor union corruption to political bribery. Las Vegas had become one of the most profitable criminal enterprises in American history, all hidden behind the glittering lights and entertainment. But the mob era wasn't solely about crime. It was also about creating the Las Vegas that people remember nostalgically. This was the era of the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, performing together at the Sands. Their shows were legendary. The camaraderie seemed genuine. They drank on stage, joked with each other, created an atmosphere of cool sophistication that defined an era. The Copa Room at the Sands became the most famous showroom in Las Vegas. Every major performer wanted to play there. It wasn't just about the money, though the money was good. It was about the prestige. Playing the Copa Room meant you'd made it. Other properties developed their own signature shows. The Tropicana had the Folies Bergère, an imported French revue featuring elaborate costumes, beautiful showgirls, and sophisticated European entertainment. Liberace performed at the Riviera with his flamboyant costumes, his candelabra on the piano, his over-the-top persona that audiences absolutely loved. Las Vegas became the entertainment capital of the Western United States. Any major performer had to play Vegas. The audiences were enthusiastic. The venues were world-class. The contracts were lucrative. Performers could do a residency, weeks or months performing regularly at one property, earning steady income whilst maintaining a base in one location rather than constantly traveling. Elvis Presley's career was revived by his 1969 residency at the International Hotel. By the late 60s, his career had stalled. His movies weren't doing well. He hadn't performed live in years. Many people thought he was finished, but his Vegas shows were spectacular. The energy, the voice, the stage presence, it proved he was still capable of commanding an audience. The residency was extraordinarily successful, leading to regular Vegas performances for the rest of his life. This pattern repeated with many performers. Vegas residencies became prestigious, rather than a sign of fading relevance. They became something artists aspired to. The steady income was attractive. The ability to perfect a show rather than constantly creating new material was appealing. The audiences came ready to be entertained, ready to spend money, ready to have a good time. The city's population grew steadily through this period. When the 1950s began, Las Vegas had perhaps 25,000 residents. By the end of the 60s, it was approaching 150,000. Still small compared to major American cities, but growing rapidly. This growth created challenges that went beyond the glamorous strip properties. The city needed schools for all the children of casino workers. It needed housing, much of it modest homes for dealers and waitresses and maintenance staff. It needed water infrastructure as consumption increased. It needed roads and sewers and all the unglamorous things cities require. Las Vegas was trying to become a real city, whilst maintaining its identity as an entertainment destination. It was trying to be both a place where people lived normal lives and a place where tourists came to escape normal life. The tension between these two identities would persist for decades, but the mob era was reaching its end. Federal law enforcement was getting more sophisticated. Gaming regulations were tightening. New leadership at the Gaming Control Board was serious about investigating ownership and financial arrangements. And corporate America was starting to recognize Las Vegas's profit potential. The shift began with one man. Howard Hughes, billionaire, recluse, aviation pioneer, film producer, someone who would accidentally help legitimize Las Vegas by bringing corporate money and methods to an industry still dominated by organized crime. Howard Hughes arrived in Las Vegas on November the 18th, 1966. He checked into the Desert Inn, taking over the entire top 2 floors, the 8th and 9th floors, for himself and his staff. He intended to stay for perhaps 10 days, maybe 2 weeks at most. He ended up staying 4 years and fundamentally changing Las Vegas. Hughes was already a legendary figure by 1966. He'd built Hughes Aircraft into a major defense contractor. He'd set aviation speed records. He'd produced films in Hollywood. He'd dated some of the most famous actresses of his era. But by the 1960s, he'd become increasingly reclusive and eccentric. He was obsessed with germs and contamination. He had elaborate rituals for handling objects. He surrounded himself with Mormon attendants because he believed they wouldn't drink or take drugs. He communicated through intermediaries rather than meeting people directly. He was brilliant and deeply strange in equal measure. His residency at the Desert Inn created immediate problems. He occupied the most valuable suites during the busy holiday season. The hotel wanted him to leave so they could rent those rooms to high-rolling gamblers who would spend money in the casino. But Hughes refused to move. Rather than force a confrontation with one of the richest men in America, the Desert Inn's owners made an unusual offer. They'd sell Hughes the entire hotel. To everyone's surprise, he agreed. In March 1967, Hughes purchased the Desert Inn for $13.2 million. Suddenly, one of the wealthiest men in America owned a Las Vegas casino. This was significant. Hughes wasn't a mobster. He wasn't a front man. He was a legitimate businessman with a well-documented fortune from aviation and defense contracts. His ownership suggested that Las Vegas could attract legitimate corporate investors, not just organized crime. But Hughes didn't stop with the Desert Inn. Over the next few years, he went on an extraordinary buying spree. He bought the Sands in 1967, the Frontier and the Silver Slipper in 1968, the Landmark in 1969. He also purchased KLOS, the local CBS television affiliate. He bought enormous tracts of land around Las Vegas Valley. His buying spree had multiple significant effects. First, it brought legitimacy to Las Vegas ownership. Hughes was eccentric, certainly, but he wasn't a criminal. His involvement suggested that legitimate businessmen with traditional sources of wealth could operate successfully in losses. Vegas. Second, it drove up property values dramatically. If Hughes was willing to pay millions for casinos, other investors became interested. Corporate money started flowing toward Las Vegas in ways it hadn't before. Third, and perhaps most important for organized crime, it provided a way out. Selling to Hughes gave mob-connected owners a legitimate exit strategy. They could sell their properties to Hughes, take the money, and distance themselves from operations that were attracting increasing law enforcement attention. It was a face-saving way to cash out. Hughes' ownership was peculiar. He never visited any of his properties. He remained in his Desert Inn penthouse, communicating with his casino managers through written memos delivered by his Mormon attendants. He made odd demands and impulsive decisions. He wanted to buy up all of the property around the Strip to control development. He wanted to buy commercial airlines. He had schemes that made sense only to him. But he had virtually unlimited capital and genuine interest in making Las Vegas successful. He saw it as the future, as a place that would continue growing and generating profits. He was willing to invest in improvements, in marketing, in anything that might increase his property's value. The corporate transition that Hughes symbolized accelerated through the 1970s. Gaming regulations became substantially stricter. The Gaming Control Board and Gaming Commission gained more power to investigate ownership structures and financial arrangements. The era of hidden mob control was genuinely ending. Large corporations started entering the market more aggressively. Hilton Hotels purchased the Flamingo in 1970 and the International in 1971. These were publicly traded companies with shareholders and auditors and financial transparency. They couldn't skim profits. They had to operate legitimately. MGM, the famous Hollywood studio, entered the casino business with the original MGM Grand, which opened in 1973. At the time, it was the largest hotel in the world with over 2,000 rooms. The scale was unprecedented, the investment was enormous, and it was completely legitimate corporate money. These corporations brought professional management practices, sophisticated accounting systems, training programs for employees, marketing strategies based on data rather than intuition. They treated casinos like any other business, something to be optimized for profitability and shareholder value. The mob didn't disappear overnight. Some operations continued into the 1980s. Some individuals maintained influence, but the systematic organized crime control of major casinos was clearly ending. Federal prosecutions helped accelerate this transition. The FBI had been building cases for years, and in the 1980s, those investigations finally bore fruit. Major trials exposed decades of mob control. People went to prison. Operations were shut down. The extent of the scam was revealed publicly for the first time. By the end of the 1980s, the mob era was effectively finished. Some vestiges remained. Some individuals with organized crime backgrounds still had influence. But the systematic skimming, the hidden ownership, the crime family control of major properties, all of that had ended. Las Vegas was entering a new era. The corporate era. An era of professional management and shareholder accountability and financial transparency. An era that would bring changes that would make even the mob years look modest by comparison. Because the corporations weren't content to run existing casinos. They wanted to build something bigger, something that had never been attempted before. They wanted to build mega resorts. November the 22nd, 1989. The Mirage opened on the Las Vegas Strip. It cost $630 million to build, making it the most expensive hotel ever constructed at that time. The Mirage was different from anything that had come before it. It wasn't just bigger, though it was certainly large with over 3,000 rooms. It was a completely different concept. A mega resort. The property had a massive casino floor naturally, but it also had multiple high-end restaurants, many featuring celebrity chefs. It had a showroom specifically designed for Siegfried and Roy's elaborate magic show featuring white tigers. It had a dolphin habitat where guests could watch marine mammals swimming in the middle of the desert. It had a white tiger exhibit. It had an indoor rainforest in the atrium with lush tropical plants and waterfalls. And perhaps most famously, it had a volcano, an artificial volcano in front of the hotel that erupted every evening, shooting flames and smoke high into the air, visible from miles away on the strip. The volcano became instantly iconic. The Mirage was built by Steve Wynn, a developer who understood something crucial. Gambling was beginning to spread to other states. Atlantic City had legalized casinos in 1976. Native American tribes were opening casinos on tribal lands across the country, following legal decisions in the 1980s. Las Vegas couldn't rely on being the only legal gambling destination in America. It needed to offer something more, something that would justify flying across the country instead of driving to a nearby casino, something that would make Las Vegas a destination rather than just a gambling location. Wynn's answer was spectacle, entertainment, experience. The Mirage wasn't just a place to gamble, it was a destination resort where gambling was merely one of many attractions. You came for the volcano, the dolphins, the tigers, the shows, the restaurants, and whilst you were there, perhaps you'd gamble as well. The volcano alone demonstrated the concept perfectly. It was free, accessible to anyone walking along the strip, whether they were guests or not. It drew enormous crowds every evening, people gathering on the pavement to watch flames shoot into the sky. And naturally, Many of those people would then walk into the casino. The free attraction fed the gaming revenue. The Mirage was wildly, spectacularly successful. It generated enormous profits from the beginning. Every component worked. The casino was busy. The restaurants were full. The show sold out. Hotel rooms were booked months in advance. It exceeded even optimistic projections. And it immediately inspired imitation. If the Mirage could succeed with this mega resort model, other developers would try the same approach. The 1990s saw an explosion of massive resort development that completely transformed the Las Vegas Strip. Excalibur opened in 1990. It was a medieval castle-themed property with over 4,000 rooms, making it larger than the Mirage. The theming was extreme: turrets and drawbridges, medieval banquet shows, staff dressed in period costumes. It was designed to attract families, with an arcade and carnival-style midway. The Luxor opened in 1993. A 30-story glass pyramid with a sphinx outside. The pyramid design meant no two rooms were the same shape. They all followed the sloping walls. Most dramatically, it featured the most powerful beam of light ever created, shooting from the pyramid's peak into the night sky. The beam was visible from commercial aircraft flying over Nevada. Astronauts reported seeing it from space. The MGM Grand opened in 1993 as well. With over 5,000 rooms, it became the largest hotel in the world. The scale was almost incomprehensible. The property covered 45 hectares. It had a theme park attached, continuing the brief attempt to make Las Vegas family-friendly. The theme park didn't last, but the hotel remained the largest for years. Treasure Island opened in 1993, connected to the Mirage by a free tram. It featured a pirate battle show performed multiple times daily in front of the hotel. Full-scale pirate ships fired cannons at each other. Stunt performers engaged in sword fights and fell into the water. It was pure spectacle, drawing huge crowds. The Stratosphere opened in 1996, with the tallest freestanding observation tower in the United States. Over 350 meters tall, it dominated the skyline. Thrill rides at the top provided additional attractions. New York. New York opened in 1997, recreating the Manhattan skyline at reduced scale. A roller coaster wove through the property, visible from the Strip. Restaurants were themed after New York neighborhoods. The attention to detail was extraordinary. The Bellagio opened in 1998, another Steve Wynn property. It was his attempt to bring European elegance to Las Vegas. An 8-hectare artificial lake featured choreographed fountain shows, with water jets dancing to music and art. Gallery displayed genuine masterpieces from Wynn's personal collection. Restaurants came from famous chefs like Julian Serrano and Michael Mina. Every element emphasized luxury and sophistication. Paris Las Vegas opened in 1999 with a half-scale Eiffel Tower that became another Strip icon. French-themed restaurants, architecture inspired by Parisian landmarks, staff trained to provide European-style service. The Venetian opened in 1999, recreating Venice with remarkable detail. Indoor canals with gondolas. St. Mark's Square reproduced inside. A painted sky ceiling that looked realistic despite being indoors. Over 4,000 suites, all larger than typical hotel rooms. enormous convention space designed to attract business travelers. Mandalay Bay opened in 1999 with a tropical theme, an enormous wave pool and beach, a concert venue that would become one of the premier locations for major touring acts. This boom period, roughly from 1989 to 2000, completely transformed the Las Vegas Strip. Every year brought new properties, each one bigger and more expensive than the last, each one trying to out-spectacle the competition. The skyline changed constantly. Properties that had been new 10 years earlier already seemed outdated compared to the latest mega resorts. The family-friendly angle that some properties pursued proved short-lived. By the late 90s, Las Vegas was backing away from marketing itself as a family destination. The economics didn't work. Families didn't gamble enough to justify the investment in children's attractions. The core demographic was adults who wanted adult entertainment. The advertising campaign that launched in 2003 captured this perfectly. What happens here, stays here. The message was clear. Las Vegas was returning to its adult roots. Yes, families could certainly visit, but the focus was on adult recreation, gambling, nightlife, entertainment designed for grown-ups. The mega resort era also fundamentally changed how casinos made money. Gaming revenue remained important, obviously, but increasingly, properties generated more money from non-gaming sources. Hotel rooms, restaurants, shows, nightclubs, retail shopping, convention space. A new term entered the industry vocabulary: non-gaming revenue. By the 2000s, many mega resorts were generating more non-gaming revenue than gaming revenue. The casinos were becoming diversified entertainment companies, rather than gambling halls with attached hotels. This diversification made the business model more stable. If gambling revenues declined temporarily, other revenue sources could compensate. The mega resorts were becoming self-contained destinations. Small cities within the city. Everything a tourist might want was available on the property, encouraging guests to stay and spend money without ever leaving. But this building boom couldn't continue indefinitely. The global economy couldn't support endless resort construction, and when the financial crisis hit in 2008, the crash was devastating. 2008. The words alone conjure memories of economic catastrophe. The housing market collapsed. Major financial institutions failed. Credit markets froze. Unemployment soared. The global economy teetered on the edge of complete collapse. Las Vegas was hit harder than almost anywhere else in America. The city's economy had become almost entirely dependent on disposable income and easy credit. Tourism requires people with money to spend on non-essential travel. Gambling requires people willing to lose money purely for entertainment. Conventions require companies with budgets for business travel and meetings. When the financial crisis hit, all of that disappeared nearly overnight. People lost jobs and stopped traveling. Credit card limits were cut, or cards were canceled entirely. Companies slashed travel budgets and canceled conventions. The flow of tourists to Las Vegas, which had seemed infinite, suddenly dried up. Visitation to Las Vegas dropped dramatically. Hotel occupancy rates, which had been above 90% during good times, fell below 60%. casino revenues crashed by double-digit percentages. Properties that had been generating enormous profits suddenly couldn't cover their operating costs. Some were at genuine risk of bankruptcy. The construction boom came to an abrupt, shocking halt. Multiple mega resort projects were in various stages of development when the crisis hit. They froze where they stood. Half-built towers remained empty. Construction cranes stopped moving and stood silent against the sky. The Fontainebleau was supposed to open in 2009, a 68-story luxury resort on the North Strip. The project was 90% complete when financing collapsed. The developer couldn't secure the money to finish construction or begin operations. It sat vacant, a massive architectural corpse visible for miles. Empty windows staring across the city. For over a decade, it stood as a monument to the crash. The Echelon project stopped construction with only foundation and parking structures complete. What was meant to be a massive multi-hotel complex became an empty lot with concrete and rebar exposed to the elements. City Center, a massive complex of multiple towers, continued construction because its financing was already in place. But it opened in 2009 into the worst possible market conditions. Despite being one of the most expensive private construction projects in history, it immediately struggled to fill rooms and generate revenue. Unemployment in Las Vegas reached 14%, far above the national average. The housing market, which had been booming through the 2000s with rapid price appreciation and speculative buying, crashed even harder than the national average. Property values fell by more than 50%. In some neighborhoods, foreclosures were epidemic. Entire subdivisions stood partially empty, with homes abandoned mid-construction. For several years, Las Vegas seemed genuinely threatened in a way it hadn't been since the early 20th century. The growth that had seemed inevitable for decades suddenly reversed. The city that reinvented itself constantly was stuck, unable to move forward, watching revenues decline and properties struggle. Some properties failed entirely. The Riviera, once a premier strip resort, declined steadily and eventually closed. The Sahara closed in 2011, sitting empty for years. Even successful properties struggled, cutting staff and reducing services to survive. But Las Vegas has always been remarkably resilient. The city has survived multiple crises throughout its history by adapting, by finding new revenue sources, by reinventing what it offers. The recovery from the 2008 crash followed this pattern. First, existing properties stabilized. They cut costs aggressively. They laid off staff and reduced hours. They focused on the most profitable operations and reduced or eliminated losing ventures. They negotiated with creditors and restructured debt. They survived. Then, slowly, new thinking emerged about what Las Vegas should become. The mega resort construction boom was clearly over. Building billion-pound properties every few years wasn't sustainable, but Las Vegas didn't need to keep building to remain successful. It needed to maximize existing properties, better restaurants, bigger shows, more nightlife options, enhanced experiences. The nightclub boom exemplified this shift. Massive nightclubs opened in various properties, featuring world-famous DJs and elaborate production. XS opened at Encore. Hakkasan opened at MGM Grand. Omnia opened at Caesars. These weren't traditional bars or even traditional nightclubs. They were enormous venues with state-of-the-art sound and lighting systems, VIP areas with bottle service costing thousands of pounds, crowds of thousands of people dancing until dawn. The clubs generated extraordinary revenue. Wealthy visitors, particularly young professionals and international tourists, would spend astonishing amounts on bottle service, reserved tables, and expensive champagne. A single night's bottle service tab could reach tens of thousands of pounds for premium tables. Celebrity chef restaurants exploded across the Strip. Gordon Ramsay opened multiple concepts. Wolfgang Puck expanded his presence. Joël Robuchon brought Michelin-starred fine dining. Michael Mina, Giada De Laurentiis, Bobby Flay, Jose Andres, every famous chef wanted a Las Vegas restaurant. The dining scene became genuinely world-class, rivaling any city globally. This shift was strategic. Las Vegas was moving away from dependence on gambling and towards being a comprehensive entertainment destination. Dining and nightlife generated substantial revenue whilst attracting visitors who might not be primarily interested in gambling. Entertainment residencies evolved as well. Instead of performers doing short engagements, major artists committed to extended stays. Celine Dion performed at Caesars for years. Elton John had a residency. Britney Spears, Lady Gaga, Jennifer Lopez. These weren't desperate acts reviving fading careers. These were major stars choosing Las Vegas as a platform for spectacular shows. The residencies made sense for everyone involved. Artists earned substantial guaranteed income without the exhaustion of touring constantly. They could perfect their shows rather than constantly creating new material. They could maintain a home base rather than living out of hotels. For properties, residencies provided reliable draw for visitors, planning trips months in advance. By the mid-2010s, Las Vegas was recovering strongly, not returning to what it had been before the crash, but becoming something different. Less dependent on gambling, more diversified, more focused on experience and entertainment across multiple categories. The recovery was significantly aided by one major decision that would fundamentally change Las Vegas's identity. The decision to embrace professional sports, ending decades of resistance from major leagues concerned about gambling's impact on competition integrity. For decades, the major professional sports leagues in America avoided Las Vegas. The National Football League, National Basketball Association, Major League Baseball, and National Hockey League all worried that having teams in a gambling center would threaten the perceived integrity of their competitions. The concerns seemed reasonable to them. Las Vegas casinos took bets on sporting events. What if players were approached by gamblers? What if games were fixed? What if the mere presence of a team in Las Vegas created an appearance of impropriety that damaged the league's reputation? So Las Vegas, despite being a major metropolitan area with passionate sports fans and the infrastructure to support professional teams, had no major league teams at all. The closest the city came was minor league baseball and hockey. The University of Nevada Las Vegas basketball team had some successful periods, but professional sports were completely absent. This changed in 2016 when the National Hockey League announced it would grant Las Vegas an expansion franchise. The Vegas Golden Knights would begin play in the 2017 to 2018 season. The decision was controversial. Many hockey traditionalists questioned whether Las Vegas could support a team, whether the city had enough year-round residents interested in hockey, whether the corporate base was sufficient, whether tourists would care about regular season games, whether hockey made any sense whatsoever in the desert. The Golden Knights exceeded every possible expectation. The team was immediately remarkably competitive through intelligent management and a combination of luck and skill. In the expansion draft, they assembled a roster that shouldn't have worked, but did. Their inaugural season saw them reach the Stanley Cup Finals, losing narrowly to Washington. The improbability of an expansion team reaching the finals in their first year made national headlines. More important for Las Vegas, the city embraced the team passionately. Games sold out consistently. The atmosphere at T-Mobile Arena was electric. Fans adopted elaborate pre-game rituals. The team became part of Las Vegas' identity in ways no one had predicted. The success proved several important things. Las Vegas could support major professional sports. The city had sufficient year-round residents and corporate support. Tourists did care about attending games, making Las Vegas one of the few cities where visiting fans would specifically plan trips around sporting events. And perhaps most important, fears about gambling integrity were overblown. Legal sports betting existed, but it didn't corrupt the competition. Other leagues took notice. The Women's National Basketball Association brought the Aces to Las Vegas in 2018. The team won championships and developed a strong local following, proving the market could support multiple teams. Then came the biggest shift of all, the National Football League. In 2020, the Oakland Raiders moved to Las Vegas. A new stadium was built specifically for the team, Allegiant Stadium, a state-of-the-art facility with a distinctive black exterior and translucent roof. The Raiders brought an entirely different level of visibility and legitimacy. American football is the most popular sport in the United States. Having an NFL team meant Las Vegas hosted nationally televised games every week during the season. It meant consideration for Super Bowl hosting. It meant mainstream acceptance as a major sports market. Formula One announced it would hold a race in Las Vegas beginning in 2023. Not just any race, but a night race on the Strip itself. Streets would be closed. A temporary circuit would be constructed. It would be one of the most spectacular settings in all of motorsports, with cars racing past the illuminated mega resorts at over 300 kilometers per hour. Other major sporting events followed. The NBA Summer League had long been held in Las Vegas. The Pac-12 Conference basketball tournament relocated to the city. NCAA tournament games were hosted regularly. Major boxing matches continued a long tradition of being held in Las Vegas, with venues like MGM Grand Garden Arena and T-Mobile Arena hosting championship bouts that drew worldwide attention. Las Vegas was becoming a sports city, not just a city that hosted occasional sporting events. It had year-round sports content, multiple teams, regular events, a sporting calendar that gave residents and visitors reasons to engage with the city beyond gambling and entertainment. The shift changed Las Vegas's fundamental identity. It was no longer just Sin City, the place you went to gamble and see shows and do things you wouldn't do at home. It was becoming a legitimate major market, a place where families could live normal lives, children could root for local teams, businesses wanted to locate operations. The sports revolution combined with the entertainment evolution to create a new Las Vegas, more diversified economically, more legitimate culturally, more sustainable structurally. The city that had been built on vice was becoming something more complex and respectable. But success brings its own challenges, and modern Las Vegas faces problems that threaten its long-term viability in ways that organized crime and financial crashes never did. Las Vegas in the 2020s faces challenges that would have seemed incomprehensible to the city's founders. Some of these challenges are familiar urban problems: housing affordability, income inequality, infrastructure strain, but others are unique to Las Vegas's geography and history. Water scarcity is the most existential threat. Las Vegas gets roughly 90% of its water from Lake Mead, the enormous reservoir created by Hoover Dam in the 1930s. The lake is fed by the Colorado River, which draws its water from snowmelt in the Rocky Mountains. Climate change and persistent drought have reduced Lake Mead to historically low levels. The bathtub ring on the canyon walls, the white mineral deposits showing where water used to reach, grows more visible every year. The lake is currently at roughly 1/4 of its maximum capacity. Las Vegas has made remarkable strides in water conservation. The city recycles nearly all indoor water use. Grass lawns have been removed and replaced with desert landscaping. Low-flow fixtures are mandated. Water-intensive industries have been restricted. The city uses water far more efficiently now than it did 20 years ago, but efficiency has limits. Las Vegas is still a major metropolitan area in the desert. The population continues growing, new development continues, though at a slower pace than before, and the water source keeps shrinking. If Lake Mead drops below certain critical levels, existing water intake pipes could be exposed above the waterline. The city has built deeper intake pipes as backup systems, but the fundamental problem remains unsolved. Las Vegas is a massive city dependent on a water source that's disappearing. The regional solution requires cooperation between 7 states sharing Colorado River water, along with Mexico, which also draws from the river. Negotiations are complex and often contentious. Everyone wants more water than is available. Climate change makes the situation worse every year. Housing affordability has become critical for working-class residents. Las Vegas was once known for relatively cheap housing compared to California. You could buy a house for substantially less than in Los Angeles or San Francisco, which attracted many people to relocate. But rapid growth, limited new construction during the recession years, and outside investors purchasing properties have driven prices up dramatically. Working-class Las Vegas residents, the dealers, waitresses, housekeepers, cooks, and maintenance workers who keep the casinos and hotels operating, increasingly cannot afford to live near their workplaces. Long commutes are common. Some workers live an hour or more from the Strip, spending substantial portions of their income on petrol and vehicle maintenance. Quality of life suffers when you work a physically demanding 8-hour shift, then spend 2 hours commuting. Income inequality is stark in Las Vegas. Casino executives earn millions. Successful performers earn millions. High-end real estate developers, nightclub promoters, celebrity chefs, they're all doing very well. Meanwhile, Service workers often earn minimum wage or slightly above. The middle class is relatively small. You're either wealthy or struggling, with little in between. The Culinary Workers Union, which represents many casino employees, remains powerful and works to negotiate better wages and benefits. But the economic pressure is constant. Automation threatens some jobs. Corporate cost-cutting affects others. The balance of power favors employers in an industry with many workers competing for limited positions. The tourism model itself faces questions about sustainability and accessibility. Resorts have added fees that didn't exist previously. Resort fees of $40 to $60 per night on top of room rates. Parking fees at properties that used to offer free parking for decades. Rising prices for food, drinks, and entertainment across the board. The cheap buffet, long a Las Vegas staple and a symbol of value for working-class tourists, has largely disappeared. Quality buffets still exist, but cost $50 to $80 per person. The days of $5 prime rib specials are long gone. Las Vegas is increasingly catering to wealthy tourists. Luxury retail shops, high-end restaurants with three-figure prix-fixe menus, expensive nightclubs where entry alone might cost hundreds of pounds, exclusive experiences priced for people with substantial disposable income. The democratized entertainment that once characterized Las Vegas, affordable fun accessible to working-class Americans, is being replaced by stratified offerings based on spending power. You can still visit Las Vegas on a budget, but the experience is increasingly different from what wealthy tourists enjoy. Corporate consolidation has accelerated. MGM Resorts and Caesars Entertainment control most of the strip between them. A handful of companies dominate the market. This concentration reduces competition and centralizes power in ways that can be problematic for workers, consumers, and the broader economy. The pandemic in 2020 temporarily devastated Las Vegas. Casinos closed completely for months. Tourism stopped entirely. Unemployment reached record levels. The recovery has been strong, but the pandemic revealed the city's vulnerability to sudden external shocks. Climate change brings extreme heat that threatens habitability. Las Vegas has always been hot, obviously, but temperatures are rising beyond historical norms. More days above 46 degrees Celsius, more strain on air conditioning and electrical systems. Questions about whether the desert Southwest will remain livable if temperatures continue increasing. Social issues persist despite economic recovery. Homelessness is visible on downtown streets. Mental health and addiction services are inadequate for the population needing them. The wealth generated by tourism doesn't always reach those who need it most. Yet despite all these challenges, Las Vegas continues growing and evolving. New properties open regularly. Resorts World, a massive Asian-themed resort, opened in 2021, the first major new resort in over a decade. Fontainebleau finally opened in 2023, after years of delays, its distinctive curve now part of the Northern Strip skyline. The Sphere opened in 2023, representing perhaps the most dramatic architectural addition to Las Vegas in years. A massive spherical venue covered in LED screens, capable of displaying images visible from miles away. Inside, an immersive screen wraps around the audience, creating visual experiences impossible in traditional venues. It represents Las Vegas, continuing to push boundaries of entertainment, technology, and spectacle. Las Vegas keeps reinventing itself, keeps finding new ways to attract visitors, keeps adapting to changing circumstances. The question that remains unanswered is whether that adaptation can continue indefinitely, or whether some combination of environmental limits, economic shifts, and social pressures will finally constrain the city's growth in ways nothing has before. Las Vegas's influence extends far beyond Nevada's borders. It's become embedded in global culture as a symbol, a concept, an idea that resonates regardless of whether someone has actually visited. The phrase, "what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas," has entered common language worldwide. It represents the idea of consequence-free recreation, of temporarily shedding your normal identity and responsibilities, of a place where usual rules don't apply. This isn't entirely accurate, of course. Actions in Las Vegas have consequences like actions anywhere, but the mythology is powerful and persistent. Las Vegas appears constantly in films and television. Ocean's 11 and its sequels portrayed elegant heist films set against strip backdrops. The Hangover turned a Vegas bachelor party into comedy gold. Casino showed the brutal mob era in unflinching detail. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas captured the surreal excess. Countless other productions use the city as setting or reference point. These depictions range from glamorous to gritty, from comedic to dark, but they all reinforce Las Vegas as fundamentally different from everywhere else. A place where extraordinary things happen, where normal life is suspended, where anything seems possible. Music videos and photo shoots use Las Vegas as backdrop constantly. The neon signs, the hotel facades, the desert landscape just outside the city. The visual language of Las Vegas is immediately recognizable globally and carries specific associations. Bachelor and bachelorette parties have become a Las Vegas staple. Pre-wedding celebrations where friends gather for one last weekend of freedom before marriage. The city has built entire business models around this demographic. Party buses, club packages, poolside cabanas, everything designed to facilitate groups celebrating. Las Vegas has influenced architecture and design worldwide. The postmodern excess, the themed environments, the use of spectacle and scale, the willingness to build replicas of famous landmarks. These aesthetic choices pioneered in Las Vegas now appear in developments globally. The mega resort concept has been exported internationally. Macau built its casino industry explicitly modeling Las Vegas, even bringing in the same companies, MGM, Las Vegas Sands, Wynn, to develop properties. Singapore's Marina Bay Sands and Resorts World Sentosa borrow heavily from Vegas DNA. Dubai's luxury developments echo Vegas excess, though without gambling. Las Vegas has fundamentally changed how Americans think about gambling. It normalized an activity that was largely illegal through most of the 20th century, made it seem like harmless entertainment, rather than moral failing, proved that gambling could be regulated, taxed, and integrated into legitimate commerce. The subsequent spread of legal gambling, state lotteries, tribal casinos, riverboat gambling, and eventually online sports betting, all owe something to Las Vegas's cultural work in making gambling acceptable to mainstream America. Las Vegas weddings have become iconic globally. quick marriages, Elvis impersonator officiants, elaborate themed chapels, drive-through wedding services. The city processes thousands of marriages annually, ranging from serious commitments to spontaneous decisions to publicity stunts. All feed into the Vegas mythology. The city has produced its own celebrities and cultural phenomena. Performers like Liberace became synonymous with Vegas excess. Siegfried and Roy created a unique form of entertainment nowhere else could replicate. Cirque du Soleil developed shows in Vegas that pushed boundaries of live performance. These are distinctly Vegas creations that reflect the city's values and aesthetics. Las Vegas has influenced language. Gambling metaphors have become business language. Betting the house. All in. Doubling down. Knowing when to hold them, knowing when to fold them. We use these phrases constantly without thinking about their origins in casino gaming. The city represents something fundamental about American culture, the belief in luck and possibility, the acceptance of risk, the idea that circumstances can change dramatically with one fortunate break, the possibility of reinvention, that you can arrive as one person and leave as another. It also represents American excess. The oversized portions, the 24-hour operations, the bright lights and loud music, the more is more aesthetic, the rejection of subtlety and restraint. Las Vegas embodies these qualities without apology or self-consciousness. The city is simultaneously celebrated and criticized, celebrated for its entertainment value, its economic success, its bold vision, criticized for its superficiality, its environmental impact, its facilitation of vice and addiction. Both perspectives contain truth. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of Las Vegas's cultural impact is its relationship with authenticity. The city is completely artificial, built from nothing in a place that can't naturally support it, themed and designed and engineered in every detail. The Eiffel Tower isn't real. The Venetian canals aren't real. Nothing about Las Vegas is natural or organic. Yet it's authentic in its inauthenticity. The fake Eiffel Tower isn't trying to trick anyone. The Venetian canals aren't claiming to actually be Venice. There's honesty in the fakeness. Las Vegas doesn't pretend to be something it isn't. This paradox resonates in an increasingly digital and mediated world. Las Vegas pioneered the simulation, the themed environment, the curated experience, the reality that's obviously constructed but engaging anyway. In that sense, Las Vegas isn't behind the times, it's ahead, having figured out decades ago what much of culture is still learning. Las Vegas is America's ID, the place where suppressed desires surface, where we act out appetites we pretend not to have, where we embrace excess we publicly criticize. The city serves a psychological function, providing space for behaviors and experiences that don't fit into normal life. And that role, that cultural function, might be Las Vegas's most lasting impact. Not the specific hotels or shows or economic models, all of which change constantly, but the space it creates in American consciousness for certain possibilities, for transformation, for escape, for being, temporarily, someone different from who you are at home. And so we arrive at the end of our journey through Las Vegas history. from springs in the desert to digital spheres, from Paiute survival strategies to Formula One races, from railway watering stops to global entertainment capitals. It's been a remarkable story, hasn't it? A story of a city that shouldn't exist but does, that faces existential threats regularly but survives, that reinvents itself constantly, sometimes by choice and sometimes by necessity. Las Vegas today stands at another crossroads, as it has so many times before. Water scarcity threatens its long-term viability. Climate change increases temperatures beyond historical norms. Housing affordability pushes working-class residents further from employment centers. Corporate consolidation concentrates power and reduces competition. Yet the city continues. New properties open. New attractions debut. Tourism remains strong. The lights still glow brightly enough to see from space. What happens next? That's the question that's always driven Las Vegas. What's the next reinvention? The next transformation? The next version of what the city can become? Perhaps Las Vegas becomes primarily a sports and entertainment destination, where gambling is secondary. Perhaps it doubles down on luxury, catering exclusively to wealthy international tourists. Perhaps it develops technologies and experiences that don't exist anywhere else yet. Perhaps it finds ways to address water scarcity and climate challenges that allow sustainable growth. Or perhaps Las Vegas faces genuine decline for the first time in its history. Perhaps the combination of environmental stress, economic pressure, and changing consumer preferences finally overwhelms the city's ability to adapt. Perhaps the impossible city proves impossible to sustain indefinitely. The honest answer is that nobody knows. Las Vegas exists in dynamic tension between growth and limitation, between ambition and reality, between possibility and constraint. Predicting its future requires predicting economic trends, climate patterns, technological developments, cultural shifts, all notoriously difficult. What we can say with confidence is that Las Vegas will try to survive. The city's entire history demonstrates relentless determination to continue existing despite circumstances suggesting it shouldn't. That determination has carried it through economic depressions, federal investigations, corporate takeovers, financial crashes, and pandemics. The springs that drew the Paiutes 10,000 years ago still flow, though now heavily supplemented by infrastructure drawing from Lake Mead. The railway that founded the town still runs through it. The impulses that created modern Las Vegas, desire for entertainment, acceptance of risk, embrace of excess, belief in reinvention, haven't disappeared from American culture. Las Vegas may look completely different in 50 years, may function in ways we don't currently recognize, may have reinvented itself yet again into something surprising. But it will probably still exist, still be attracting visitors, still be creating spectacle, still be defying odds and geography. Because that's what Las Vegas does. It survives, it adapts, it continues. The impossible city that refuses to stop growing. The entertainment capital constructed where no city should be. The gambler's paradise that represents America's dreams and contradictions in equal measure. Las Vegas, past, present, and future. Improbable, excessive, contradictory, resilient. A city built on springs and railways and federal dams and mob money and corporate capital and endless ambition. A city that shouldn't exist but does. A city that faces enormous challenges but hasn't stopped yet. The complete history of Las Vegas is still being written. New chapters continue to unfold. The story isn't finished. Perhaps it never will be.